about pretty much the same Bible verse. But I think out of all, just for all that haven't been here every single week, pretty much the way the lectionary has worked the last 4 or 5 weeks has been talking about the same chapter from the Gospel of John. About how Jesus is the bread of life. And, some of us maybe are on a little bit carb overload at this point. But I'd say, out of all the weeks so far, this one is probably the best specific kind of verses about it. And here's why. I'll get to it in a second. But so a lot of times, I'll often talk about, with L too, I've already said before, but a lot of times when I'm talking in conversations with my friends about God and why I want to be a pastor, most of them aren't particularly religious at all, and they wonder why I want to do this sort of thing at all. They cite all these things, all these problems that religion has caused in the world. A lot of different religious groups, often treat women horribly or disregard things that we know through science, or are fairly intolerant of the LGBT community, or sometimes religion literally causes people to kill each other. So, they cite all these things and they wonder, why do you want to be involved in that? Why do you want to be involved in religion at all? And sort of, one time someone literally said to me, why would you want to just, why is all those horrible things that happen worth it just to kind of go hang out with some dude in the sky with a beard after you die? Just forget that. I'd rather, a lot of people will say they would rather just go to brunch or watch football on a Sunday morning instead. And I do enjoy brunch, definitely. But I do that other mornings. Now, usually my first response is to say that a lot of those things aren't really the actual religion at all, but just people kind of using God or using religion as an excuse to sort of cover for their own kind of shortcomings. But and what the biggest thing that I usually argue when I talk with these folks is that while we certainly believe in heaven and an afterlife and something along the lines of the guy with the beard in the sky, probably looks a little bit different than we imagined, but something like that, that's an important part of our faith. That an even more important part of our faith is that as Christ tells us in today's gospel, it's incredibly good news that God isn't just hanging out somewhere in the sky, but that the focus of what God does is right here, right now, incredibly real in the flesh, in every aspect of our human lives, that God is right here, right now, and that is the main focus of how God works, in flesh and blood. And that's what today's gospel message is about. It's not just about it kind of sounds weird and kind of Donner Party, cannibalistic thing, whatever. Actually, indeed, the earliest Christians were often accused of cannibalism. But what Jesus is really saying here is how Jesus is deeply active in our everyday lives. And I think this is why one of my favorite quotes about religion of all time is kind of what this idea that Jesus is deeply active in the stuff of everyday life. That's why Martin Luther King Jr. once said that any religion that pretends to care for the souls of people but is not interested in the slums that damn them, or the city government that corrupts them, or the economic order that cripples them is a dry, passive, do-nothing religion in need of new blood. Now I'll read that one more time. Any religion that pretends to care for the souls of people but is not interested in the slums that damn them, the city government that corrupts them, and the economic order that cripples them is a dry, passive, do-nothing religion in need of new blood. Amen. I think the reason a lot of people don't want to go to church anymore is because they don't see how church is actually an important force in everyday life, in the way, in the real world that they live their lives. But listening to Jesus' words this Sunday, we can affirm that yes, God is mostly active in the right here, the right now, in flesh and blood. It's why this is why we do so much to care for other folks. Because we affirm that Jesus is active the most in the right here and the right now. It's why we are about to install 4 visitation ministers. We're starting a new ministry where it's not just me going out to visit our homebound members, but other members of the community have volunteered and have been properly trained to go out and visit all our homebound members a few more times a month. It's important to be serving these people that have served our community for their entire lives. And Jesus is especially in those moments, right there, right now, in flesh and blood. You can affirm that. It's why we are about to start our new food pantry. Folks have been hard at work for almost a year now, getting a food pantry going, and it's I think what we're going to be sort of blessing it on September 27th and opening it October 5th, if I got the dates right in my notebook. And we're going to be working, especially through the school systems, to get referrals from like social workers and that sort of things of families that are hungry. And we're going to be literally feeding people through this program. Deeply attentive to how God is active in the right here, the right now, in flesh and blood, in the real human needs of everyday people. This is the same reason why we often talk about real issues here at church. That I'm not just talking about, it's not sort of just, God loves you and have a nice day, but we've talked about important issues. While we've talked about race and hunger and all sorts of different international issues, because that God is as active in those things as he is not just right here, right now at church, but around the world. And so we firmly believe God's words that he is active in flesh and blood, right here, right now. This is why the central rite of our faith is, it's nothing big and fancy. This is even a better illustration than our typical altar. But it's nothing big and fancy. It's simply having a meal. It's not a symbol for having a meal. It's we are having a meal together. It's the most simple yet incredibly sacred thing we do every day together when we sit around the dinner table as our families. We break bread together, and that is the central rite of our faith. And that's how God has decided to especially break into our community. So that incredibly simple, everyday, but incredibly sacred rite of just breaking bread together and sharing drink together. God is especially active in our everyday lives. Not just here at church, and not just in like some apocalyptic future, and not just sort of in the sky somewhere, but in the everyday aspect of life. Whether it's you're having a great day and there's a lot to celebrate, or whether you're having the absolute worst day of your life, God is equally and especially active in the right here, right now, in flesh and blood. And that, my sisters and brothers, is incredibly good news. Thanks be to God. Amen.